Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying for the last and the best presentation of the conference. Just as a reminder, please turn your cell phones off or on to vibrate, and we will be videoing this presentation. We will not be videoing the Q&A, so please feel free to ask lots of questions. My name is Doug Novetsky. I'm Stormwater Manager and happen to be Alison's supervisor for King County. And so I think you're going to get a lot out of this presentation. Just to make sure you're in the right room for the right presentation, the subject of this presentation are common source control problems and innovative routes to compliance. Alison is with King County, and she has 5 years of hands-on experience in stormwater compliance and management experience, working with industrial, construction, and municipal stormwater general permits in Washington State. Alison is currently a stormwater pollution prevention inspector at King County. In this role, she inspects commercial and multifamily residential properties within unincorporated King County, providing technical assistance, education to businesses and property owners to identify and mitigate potential pollution discharges. Alison has inspected a variety of businesses ranging from restaurants to auto wrecking yards to dental offices to equestrian facilities and more. She has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And considering I just gave her a performance review, she has done over 1,000 inspections for me. So just to give you an idea of the level of experience that she has, and that doesn't count her prior experiences with other organizations. So she is considered the best and brightest that we've got, and so I turn this over to Alison for the presentation. Thank you very much.
I talk really loud, so I'm not going to use the microphone. Can people hear me in the back okay? Yeah. Oh, I have to darn it. Okay. Well, I'm going to walk around and use the microphone. Okay. I'm going to use the microphone. I'll try not to blind you out with my loud voice. Just to get a sense of the room, can you raise your hand if you're a Phase 2 jurisdiction? Okay, mostly. Any other Phase 1s in the room? A couple? Okay, great. So as Doug said, I'm a pollution prevention inspector with King County Stormwater Services. And for those of you that know the program, we do both local source control and we're doing inspections for our NPDES municipal stormwater permit. And today I want to give you a bit of background of common problems that we see during our inspections. And Snohomish County gave a great presentation on the whole comprehensive look at a source control program for a Phase 1 to help out the Phase 2s. This dives specifically into when you're doing an inspection, what are some key points that I'm seeing. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a scratch at the surface to give you a taste of what's out there. And in addition, the common or innovative routes that I've seen businesses use to come into compliance. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. Some businesses have done a really great job of choosing their own BMPs that fall into compliance with us, and I'm all for that. So diving in, a quick outline agenda. I'll give a brief overview of our inspection program, but again, Snohomish County gave a great background of a Phase 2 inspection program. Going to talk about common problems that I see in the field. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's a great look if you're starting to get a source control program going. Maybe some key things to have your inspectors keep an eye out for. I'm also going to talk about innovative routes to compliance. We have a stormwater pollution prevention manual. It lists a lot of great BMPs in there that are recommended to use, but it leaves it open to interpretation. We're not saying you have to get this specific spill pad installed under this kind of canopy to meet our compliance standards. We're leaving it up to the businesses to help them implement what they want to invest in, and as long as it meets our requirements, I'm all for it. And if I get nothing else across to you, I want you to remember these three things: the importance of education, persistence, and engagement during an inspection, okay? Education, persistence, and engagement, and I'll talk through that throughout my talk today. So again, a brief overview. As I'm sure many of you know, King County has a Phase 1 municipal stormwater permit. We're required to inspect 20% of our business inventory, and we are inspecting all commercial businesses and multifamily properties, and our manager interprets that as basically anything with a parking lot. So if you drive on the site, that's a potential pollutant generating source, so we will go out and inspect it. Like Doug mentioned in my bio, we inspect everything from dental offices, auto wrecking yards, churches, elementary schools, high schools, the whole gamut. So it's the commercial, it's the industrial, and the multifamily properties. So basically anything except a single-family residential home. So these are some common problems that I see. Again, these are just things that stand out to me when I think of what are the main issues I see during an inspection. This is not at every site that I'll see all of these things, and again, it's not an exhaustive list, but I'm gonna dive through each of these and show you pictures from my inspection that'll hopefully wake you up in this last presentation of the day. But again, illicit discharges, so anything that's not rainwater going down our drain, liquid material storage, mostly outside storage that we're looking at. Outdoor waste storage, that includes the garbage, the recycling, and the scrap metal, and the used cooking oil, so all of that. Universal waste, and I'm mostly talking about spent fluorescent lights in this category. Vehicle washing, and stormwater catch basin maintenance. So, illicit discharges. Again, I'm gonna give you examples from inspections because I think that's the best way for you to actually see what I'm talking about. So this was a marine boatyard that had a vehicle washing area, and they had it designed that the boat would be taken out of the water and placed over this concrete pad here. And they had it very well designed. All the water went into a sump, it went to an oil water separator, it was captured, they brought it off site for treatment, everything looked great. Except when I was there, the water started coming this way, and it went into this drain right here. And that drain did not tie into their process water system. That went directly into Puget Sound, which was right behind me in this picture. So I told them, excuse me, you need to stop this immediately. And the manager that I was with did communicate that to the employees, but they needed a more permanent fix. Okay, if the boat continues to be parked right here and that water keeps going there, they need to stop that water. I didn't tell them, you need to plug this drain, you need to install this kind of cover on it. I just told them you need to stop that water from getting into that drain. So they decided to install a concrete berm around there and quadruple label it, if anyone else caught that. Those are 4 stenciled labels next to it, which, hey, it's better than 1, I guess. But so they installed this concrete berm here, and that was their way of preventing that illicit discharge. And as I mentioned, they also had the education aspect to their employees to make sure the employees understood, hey, this drain is not connected to our process water system. We need to make sure that no boat washing water goes in there. Another example of an illicit discharge I found was actually at a dry cleaning facility. I was walking around the backside and I noticed this pipe coming out of the building right here and going into the ground. Thought, wonder what that's from. I followed this trench line that looked like that was dug to a storm drain over here. And sure enough, there's this gray, cloudy water in the drain. And I thought, gee, that doesn't look like rainwater at all. And so I talked to the business and I said, do you guys know what this pipe is coming out of your building right here? He said, of course I do. It's boiler blowdown water. It's been going into that drain for 40 years. I said, cool, that's not rainwater. It can't go into that drain. And luckily, the gentleman was very amiable to these changes and respected the environment, and I didn't have to convince him otherwise. But I did tell him under no circumstances you need to remove this illicit discharge connection immediately. He had a few options he could have done, but they elected, and I apologize for the blurry image, but they elected to reroute it to this drum here, which then went to their sanitary line on site, and they were able to discharge it through that. But they did remove the pipe on site. So again, first step was educating him. He didn't know. He'd been doing this for so long that he felt grandfathered into whatever he was doing. So first step was education. It did take a long time for them to come into compliance. If you see these first pictures, there's July, and now it's September. So it took a few months to be following up with them and being flexible on deadlines. Okay, he has to work with his sanitary sewer district or maybe his landlord, and there's other steps you have to take. But then engaging with him to help them understand why this matters and connecting it a little deeper into not just meeting my requirements, but helping him understand the greater implications. This business was not far from Puget Sound either, so making that direct connection. The second category of common problems that I see is liquid materials that are stored outside. And our stormwater pollution prevention manual states that if you have a container, a portable container of liquid stored outside, it needs a form of secondary containment. Again, we don't specify to the extent that the spill pad needs to be spec'd or what have you. We just say that it needs to be stored in secondary containment. So this was, I think, a nursery. It's common just to find tanks like this for fueling for, a tractor or one-off pieces of equipment. They didn't use it a whole lot, but it was a single-walled tank, and we told them this needs a form of secondary containment. Now, they could have gotten a double-walled tank. They could have brought it inside. They could have put a spill pad under it and put a cover over it. They had 100 different options, and I didn't tell them what they had to do. I just told them you need secondary containment, and that needs to be under cover. So they decided, hey, I have this big plastic Rubbermaid container that my cows used to drink out of. Would that count? And I said, sure, why not? It's free. So they put the tank inside that and put it in a barn structure that they had on site. And that was all a free upgrade for them. Sure, it took some time to move it and whatnot, but it was all free and it was easy for them to implement. And now he didn't have to pay anything. He thought this was great. And now it kept the tank dry. So it had some other some benefits for him as well. And it met all of our requirements. So he didn't have to spend any money on that. More common problems for liquid material. This was at a gas station. A lot of gas stations will have drums on site that have a gas-water mixture in them, and that's from the spill buckets by the on the ground where the fuel tanks come and fuel up their underground storage tank. And those spill buckets can sometimes get some rainwater seeped into them, and if they come in contact with the gasoline, it's a moderate risk of waste, and they need to manage that appropriately. I'm not going to get into the management side of things, but again, we're dealing with a portable container of liquid that's stored outside, and they need to put that within secondary containment and under cover. Now, I'm sure everyone's been to a gas station. They don't have a whole lot of storage inside, so there's not really an option to bring that indoors, so they have to figure out something outside. So I've had gas stations get spill pads like this, put the drums on top, great. However, this is now not under cover, so they need to put that under cover. And this business decided to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever and just get like a small shed box that they constructed outside. That's met my requirements for covering. It's on a spill pad, boom, done. They didn't have to retrofit anything inside or not make any crazy upgrades. They spent some money, but again, they're now invested in this. They spent some money on it, but that's met our requirements and it's not a huge, crazy investment. Alternatively, I've had businesses that have decided to build the roof over their spill pads, which does provide now some extra dry storage area for them, so it's not a benefit that they get. And I think this is the last one, the liquid material area. This is a container of DEF fluid at an auto facility. And again, it was outside. It didn't have any secondary containment or covering. But they were so excited because they had a spill pad on site. They were like, we can use this. I said, great. And you can see the building behind there. I said, why don't you just put the container inside if you want? That'll meet our covering needs. Well, there was a conflict with the people that were accessing this container. They were only accessing it like really early in the morning when the business wasn't open, and they didn't want to give them a key to the building, yada, yada. So they got super excited and said, can we just build our own cover? And I was like, sure, build your own cover. That sounds great. So they built this, and now again, they're invested in this. They've spent time and money and sweat and love and tears in it all, and so they want to protect that and keep that. So again, that was their form of engagement in this, and that met our requirements. Outdoor waste storage. This is a lovely container of used cooking oils. I'm sure many of you have seen on inspections. And our main requirements for used cooking oil like this is that it, 1, be labeled, check, general biodiesel, waste cooking oil only. 2, that it has a cover on it. And 3, that there's no spills. And I know it's hard to see, but this is covered with spills on the ground. Okay, so this was in a strip mall. There were multiple restaurants using this used cooking oil container. And I went to all of the restaurants and I said, hey guys, you need to do a better job of your used cooking oil BMPs, and I explained all of that. Of course, they all said, my employees are great, they all do it perfectly, must be that guy. And the other guy said, my employees all do it great, must be that guy. Anyways, worked with both of them, explained our requirements, and I want you to follow this timeline at the bottom. So April 18th, this falls under our persistence category. So the next time I came out, they had covered it. Great. There's still spills everywhere. They clearly haven't cleaned up anything. So I went back out and explained the need to clean up the spills. The spills got worse. It's now end of May, and the spills have seeped to the other area now of the waste storage area. So I'm going back out and I'm talking to both restaurants and telling them, hey, you really need to clean up your spills. And they said, fine, we'll just get a different container. So they took the drums off site, and they end up getting a new container. And I thought, hallelujah, we've solved the problem. Hopefully this will be easier for them just to lift up, put in, close the lid. We'll be done. This is great. Ground's clean, thank goodness. Start of June. By early August, we now still have spills everywhere. The container did get labeled for what it's worth, and sure, it's closed, and the locking can be helpful, but maybe it was locked and the employee decided to just spill it on the ground. I'm not sure. But now there's spills everywhere, and I will say that I was working with property management this whole time and talking to them, and of course they're saying, well, we're talking to the businesses, they're just not doing anything. And finally, property management threw up their hands. They said, you know what, we'll clean it. But if we have to clean it again, it's on the restaurant to pay for it. And I thought, cool, that puts the onus on the restaurant, both restaurants, to finally get their act together and apply these best management practices on site. So the education, I worked with the businesses to explain our BMPs that they're required to implement. A lot of persistence in going out to the site, probably a dozen site visits. And then the engagement was the management working with the businesses and explaining to them that they are required to do this, and if they don't, they'll be held financially liable. So that got them to get their act together. Outdoor waste storage, another category that I talked about was scrap metal. So this was an automotive site. Our main requirements for scrap metal is that it's in a leak-proof container and it's undercover. Sure, they met the covering requirement, but that cardboard box didn't really last in the rain for very long. So again, this will fall into the persistence category. We're starting in late January. I talked to the business and he got really jazzed about building a cover over his scrap metal. Again, I told him you just need leak-proof container, undercover. You can do with that what you want. So he said, great, I'm gonna build this. I'm gonna get a contractor and we're gonna build a cover over it because then I won't have to worry about it. I thought, okay, great. So by early April, he had a cover, but you could see there's still a cardboard box sitting there. So we finally decided, you know what, I'll build my own leak-proof container. I'm gonna get some pieces of wood and some thick plastic liner and some liquid nails and boom, there you go. And you know what? That sounds great, and I think that's awesome. He, again, put that sweat, blood, love, tears, everything into that thing. He wants to keep it intact because he spent his time and money on it. So he did. He has a leak-proof container. It's undercover. He's now invested in that. I think, granted, this was like 6 months later. But again, being persistent, we're flexible. If it's the timeline that you need extended, okay, as long as I see progress on site, I'll give the businesses time to get it done. There's the end result. Another issue with the scrap metal bins is sometimes they have really fine metal shavings that they're putting into the bin. And with this site, they had an issue with the dumping in the back. And what you can't see here is the scrap metal bin did not have a cover on it. So again, I explained to them, hey, you guys need to get a cover. They did actually have some covered storage on site. And I said, you know, you could just move it over there. That didn't work for the layout of their site, so they decided to build their own lid on top of this, which I thought was really cool because it has a little hinge structure. So you can open up the small one if you just have a couple pieces to throw in, or you can open up the big one if it's a forklift dumping something in there. So again, they were engaged now because they built their own BMP, and I think that's a great option. This is another scrap metal bin, and I just wanted to give a plug for this. Again, it's uncovered. I told them, hey, you need to keep it covered at all times, and they said, cool, can we throw a tarp over it? I said, sure, why not? That meets our requirements. For some businesses, they don't like this because if they're constantly throwing stuff into their scrap metal bin, that's obnoxious to constantly be pulling a tarp on and off. But this business, it was once a week maybe they dumped it, so they didn't mind just putting the tarp there. So $5 off of Amazon, and they were in compliance. Universal waste. I'm not sure how many people deal with this during inspections or their programs, but fluorescent lights have mercury in them and they need to be properly recycled, but if they're kept on site, they need to be kept in closed, labeled containers. A room does not count as a closed labeled container, and so this was horrific when my colleague Connor and I went onto this site. So they need to do something about it. I don't have an after picture for this one, but this is what you shouldn't do. Options for what you can do. The box that the light bulbs come in fit them perfectly for a reason, so use that to store your light bulbs in. And there's language that Ecology has of what specifically needs to be listed on those box. Waste lamps works, universal waste works, but having it in a closed labeled container. I also had a business that constructed a box like this with a lid on top and a universal waste label. That works for me as well. Vehicle washing. Common problem we see on sites. I know it's been talked about in a few presentations today. The short version is explaining to businesses that under no uncertain circumstances can anything but rainwater go down here. So you can see even with a very well stenciled label at these drains, sometimes people don't get it that nothing but rainwater can go down there. So just providing, again, that human education component and explain to people where exactly that drain goes. Hey, that goes right into the Duwamish. You can't be putting soapy water down there. Well, what do I do? Bring it to a car wash or come up with alternatives. We worked with businesses to come up with alternative washing plans or install a wash bay or what have you, but this is not an option. And lastly, stormwater catch basin maintenance. If you have plants growing out of your catch basin, you've probably waited a little too long to clean it. Really, the two modes of innovative routes to compliance for this are hire a vacuum truck or do it yourself. I've had plenty of businesses lift up the grate lid, get a shovel or other tool, and take out all that sediment. My only requirement is that you clean it all out. If I've told you to clean it, clean out all the sediment, put it in a wheelbarrow, and if it meets our requirements and it's non-hazardous waste, you can put it in a trash bag and throw it away. So that's an easy one there. So wrapping up here in conclusion, education, education, education. Our program is based on technical assistance and education. At the forefront, I consider myself an educator to the public. I understand that when you start a business, no one gives you a Stormwater 101 manual and says, hey, these are all the stormwater BMPs you have to implement. A dental office doesn't know that, equestrian sites aren't always in the loop, and auto wrecking yards sometimes don't give a crap about it. So educating them on the best management practices that each site is required to implement. And persistence. I have sites, I know SPU just gave a great presentation on how long it takes them to do their inspections, and they were able to cut the time in half using lean, and that's all great. Sometimes it takes me a day to wrap up an inspection. Sometimes I have to follow up 12 times to get in compliance with sites. I don't mind waiting longer and being flexible if the business is actually doing something and if they're actually taking action and being progressive. But being persistent is really important. You can't just say, oh, okay, well, it's been 6 months, they haven't done it, I'll check on them next year. That's not okay. Engaging people, encourage that creativity. This is the engagement component that I mentioned. I don't want to just tell people, put this catch basin filter in that catch basin and solve the problem. If there's another alternative route that the business is thinking of, that means they've already taken that next step and they're engaged, they're thinking about it, they're making a connection, they're drawing it to themselves, and that will help ensure compliance in the future. That'll make them want to continue to implement those BMPs, continue that maintenance, and help them get creative. If they have other ideas that would meet your standards, I would rather them think of the idea themselves, have that sense of pride, than me telling them what to do. And lastly, information doesn't change behavior. As my boss always says, if that was the case, we would all wear our seatbelts and no one would smoke. People understand these things, but you have to connect it down to a personal level. As someone mentioned earlier, again, whether that's, oh, you love to go fishing, I do too. Oh, you have grandkids that swim in this water, I do too. Try to make that connection with them and relate stormwater to something else. I think what we've learned throughout MuniCon today is that there's a complexity of stormwater that the public doesn't always get, and a lot of our roles in this room is first and foremost education to the public, and we're public servants, and really working to relate that down to a personal level to each person that you represent in your agency is really important. So thank you all for lasting through the last presentation today, and I'm open for questions if you have any.